I'm really delighted to be joined by Gillian and Paul as we look at the Investing in Communities Fund. We're going to hear first of all from Gillian, who's just going to do a presentation just around the fund, and then Paul's going to come in and talk about his experience of being a recipient. As ever, there is plenty of time at the end for any questions you have. There's always questions in my experience when we have funding webinars. So if there's something you're desperate to ask, even if you don't, we'll just ask it as a general question. So you can send that as a message through chat directly to me, or through the Q&A session, or in the general chat discussion, and we will pick up the questions at the end. So again, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand straight over to Gillian, and I'm just going to upload her slides for her. So thank you, Gillian.
Thanks, Naomi. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Gillian Gun. I work in Scottish Government in the community-led regeneration team, and I support the delivery of the Investing Communities Fund. It's great to be here today to talk to you about the fund. You may already have had the opportunity to join some of the webinar sessions that we ran at the end of last year with technical problems. Hopefully that will not be an issue for us today. So really briefly, the Investing Communities Fund, we anticipate the fund's opening in April. It's for funding covering the period 2023 to 2026, as the slide there talks about, and very much around the picking up on the support that communities have been delivering through the pandemic and for the many years before that, and continuing our commitment to supporting communities in delivering services and projects for the people that live and work in their areas. Naomi, next slide, if that's okay, please. So this is a slightly abbreviated slide set from the ones that we've run on the webinar, just to try and keep the conversation a little bit more succinct and probably enable some questions at the end. There are 4 key objectives for the fund that are focusing on poverty, inequality and disadvantage, in terms of supporting people so that fewer people are experiencing poverty and disadvantage, that we're improving life chances and opportunities and supporting people to live healthier lives. Around place, so developing and sustaining place-based approaches. So we're looking for organisations that are working within those communities, that are rooted within those communities, that are connected and working in partnership. Community-led regeneration, so supporting communities to be active and developing and delivering and services and to meet the challenges that they've identified and are connected into and involved in making the decisions about things that are really important to them. And also then about ensuring a just transition to net zero. So those are our 4 key objectives for this fund, and reflecting the context of the community that you're currently working in, how that's been changed by COVID. And the way that you've needed to adapt what you're doing to meet the challenges that are now presented to you. One of the things that we are looking for through this fund is a commitment to the Fair Work First criteria, and in particular guaranteeing living wage, real living wage for anybody that is supported through the funding that you apply for. Next slide, Naomi. Thank you. So this slide, and this is available on our website. You can access the information because I appreciate it's a really busy slide in terms of who can apply for the funding. As you can see, community voluntary organisations, registered charities, community councils, housing associations, housing cooperatives, registered social landlords. I don't want to go through the whole list there. It'll be there and available for you to see afterwards. And as I say, that's available on our website so that you can look at it in more detail. In terms of those, the eligible applicant organisations, what we're looking for from our communities is to come together and to show in your applications how you've looked at what the community needs, and how as a community you're coming together to respond to those needs. And as I said, kind of very much picking up on the partnership approach and working that we've seen over the course of the pandemic, that not one single community organisation can necessarily address all of the challenges that are faced by the community, but how you come together to collectively do that. So for organisations that may be on the call today, if you aren't an eligible organisation for this list, to be connecting with another organisation in your community area that is, and having that conversation, that discussion with them around what you provide and how collectively you address those challenges, and potentially putting forward a partnership application through an eligible organisation that really shows us the community coming together. Amy, if you want to move to the next slide, thank you. So a really brief overview of just some of the key points from the fund in terms of what you can apply for. As I mentioned at the start there, the funding covers the period from the 1st of April 2023 through to March 2026. We have an approximate fund value at the moment of around 10 million in each financial year. So over the 3 years, a total pot of about 30 million. It is a revenue fund predominantly, but we do for the first time have a small amount of complementary capital budget. The maximum that we're looking for applications to apply for over the 3-year period is £350,000, which would include up to a maximum of 20,000 for small scale capital costs as well. That small complementary capital budget, looking for each applicant organisation to apply for no more than 20,000 of their total 350 as being capital. We expect most applications to be applying for the 3 full financial years that the funding is available for. But if not, if you have a project that's running for less than 3 years, then the maximum we'd be looking to apply for in any one financial year is 150,000. We've set a small minimum amount for applications, which would be 5,000, and this would be, for example, if you were running a feasibility study, potentially helping some support costs for delivering a local place plan or a community action plan. Ideally, if you are delivering something like that, if that was the focus of an application, then we'd be thinking about the onward projects that would come from that feasibility study or that local place plan, and bringing in project delivery costs, albeit they would obviously need to be estimated. For successful applications, we're looking for your activity to commence on as soon as possible after the funding is available, so the 1st of April 2023, and ideally no later than September 2023. That recognises, particularly for projects where you're taking on recruitment, that doesn't automatically always happen straight from the start of the funding period, and can sometimes take a little while to get in place. But ideally to have that done and be up and running by the 30th of September at the latest. Naomi, next slide. I think it's my last. And just this slide with some additional information on where you can look for further advice and guidance. So there is our Investing Communities Fund Scottish Government webpage, the link to that there. At the moment, what we've got on there is the draft guidance. We're updating it fairly regularly. The main body of the questions that will be in the application form will be added onto the website, along with the guidance notes we're putting on, and a recorded session of the webinars that we've already run, which will be the full presentation, so not this abbreviated one, but the full version of our webinar. Additional links there for climate action. Climate is a new element to the fund this year. I'm appreciating that some of the community organisations that have in the past applied to the Investing Communities Fund may not have had climate focus. So there's a range of support that you can get to help you think about how you can embed climate into your projects. And then other information about other sources of funding, and the new Place website that has just launched in the last week, which will give you some further information around place-based working. It also includes guidance on local place plan development too. That is me. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Jill. I think there was a timer just on the last slide; it kept going off. But I will make sure I send out those details to people as well, so that everyone's got those useful contacts and web links as well. So I know there'll be questions, because I know I've been writing down a few as you went through your presentation, and I can see some starting to come through in the chat. So we'll perhaps come to those. You may want to look at some of the chat function, and then you'll have a good sense of what a few of the questions are as we come back to those. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Paul. Those of you who come to our sessions regularly know I'm based down in Dumfries and Galloway, and I'm always delighted when I have someone from this area of Scotland join the webinars too. So I'm delighted that Paul's joining us from the Community Reuse Centre down over in Stranraer, and he's going to be talking about his experience of having received money from this fund and talking us through that. So then you're going to tell us a little bit about your project, so people have an understanding of what you do first, Paul, and then we'll hear
That's
about
right.
the fund as well.
Yes,
so thank you.
I was going to start off with actually talking you through what we do, so there's a little bit of a backdrop, and then finish off on the funding arrangements that we've got with Gillian's team. Okay, so my name's Paul Smith, and I work for an organisation called the Furniture Project, and we're based in Stranraer, as Naomi says, down in the southwest corner of Scotland. Kind of just thank Naomi and Duncan for the invitation today, and thank Gillian too, because it's much appreciated, the insight, particularly for our own development. So I've been asked to talk to you about what the Furniture Project do and touch on the working relationship with inspiring communities. So our history, we've spent kind of 20 years in a housing scheme in Stranraer, which was in the top 5% of the multiple indices of multiple deprivation. So whilst the premises weren't great, it gave us kind of great grounding in terms of giving us community values and giving us real good close contact with members of our local community, and they were the ones that really drove the project forward. So could I have the next slide, please? So in 2017, we moved from those premises into new premises, and that was after a reasonably long process that we secured a 20-year contract with Dumfries and Galloway Council to construct, maintain and operate a community reuse shop on a site for zero waste park in Stranraer, and that included collecting a series of goods that were agreed within the business plan from 3 household waste recycling centres across Wigtonshire. So our goal is to alleviate the effects of poverty across across Wigtonshire. We do this in a number of ways, but primarily it's through the collection of household furniture and electrical appliances and homeware. We also supply volunteers and trainees and supported employment for people to learn new skills and share skills with each other, also to reduce social isolation, whilst improving people's physical and mental health. So that plays a part in community life, and also enables people to access employment. So I'm not sure, we seem to be whizzing through the slides a little bit quicker than what I'd anticipated, but so we've got
they're coming through on a timer, Paul, and I can't control it. I'm not pressing anything, so
okay. It certainly wasn't set up on the timer, but
yeah, let me see if I can fix it in the background while you're just talking through, and I'll bring it back up. Just a sec.
Yeah, so our volunteers, like every organisation that has volunteers, are really kind of instrumental to everything we do. And they really set our scene in terms of connecting us with our local community, and they're with us on a kind of daily basis, and they can work with us pretty much all week if they'd like to. Someone's retired and they're liking to keep active, but also it might be just for maybe a couple of hours a year for wrapping Christmas presents for children at Christmas. So there's any number of different roles that we have, and what we're really interested in is linking the right people to the right tasks to enable us to undertake the services that we provide to our local community. As I say, they provide us with a kind of great inspiration for not only the activities that we're doing, but also linking us into all sorts of different community events that we end up getting involved in. So as I say, we get involved in lots of community events, and good examples of those is Stranraer Scottish Week, which started out as a series of events in July, and now there are events that run throughout the whole course of the year within the local community, including those events in July too. So we also run Christmas hamper events, Christmas events and Christmas hampers, where Christmas hampers we supplied over 300 people with Christmas hampers over the Christmas period. One of the projects that is funded by this particular fund is upcycling workshops that we provide for people to get involved to upcycle all sorts of things, primarily furniture, but other things as well. Get involved in a local community poppy appeal. We constructed an accessible pathway, which is a kind of nearly 2 miles long for a community council. We work with the council's anti-poverty team as well on a winter warmth programme. So we supply clothing to people over the winter period, and probably one of the big projects that we work on is supplying free school uniforms to families to make sure that their children are able to go to school on parity with their peers. As I mentioned, we do the upcycling workshops where we've renovated sofas, and we've renovated all sorts of kind of tables, chest of drawers, and so on that you'll see in the pictures. So could I go to the next slide, please, Naomi? So the kind of the 4 activities that we really provide. The first one is the community reuse shop, and that's what we secured the contract for. And the other 3 projects is we've got a small shop in the town that we call We Love Local, and where we've not got the space in the larger shop on the Zero Waste Park, we supply all sorts of clothing for the whole family, along with homeware as well. So that could be small electrical appliances to cutlery, crockery, and it's all about making it affordable, so it's accessible to absolutely everyone. Just over a year ago, we started a program called Rinse Active, and that was really tied back into our contract with Dumfries and Galloway Council about recycling push bikes. That in itself has really taken on legs and really run across the community and linked up with so many different organisations, because the guys are involved in bikeability. They work with local hospitality companies and organisations at campsites where they hire out bikes in the summer. They spend a lot of time working with Dumfries and Galloway Council, lobbying for infrastructure changes to enable cyclists to use our local roads. They also do local lead rides to encourage people who are not confident on push bikes to come along for the first time and use those push bikes and go out into the community. They also provide e-bike services, so you can come along and have a taster of an e-bike. Because obviously everyone knows that e-bikes are very expensive to purchase, and there's some kind of skepticism about their what they're likely to provide. But we've got a ladies and a men's push bike that people can go out and go and use in the community to before they make a decision. Finally, we've got the Fed Up Cafe, which has actually spent. We set the Fed Up Cafe up after holding what we call a big Christmas dinner, which was about 3 to 4 years ago. And the idea was to encourage people to come along and have a Christmas dinner together, that maybe people that weren't necessarily going to be spending it in the company of their friends and family. After 100 people attending that event, we quickly realised that there was an opportunity there for something to be provided on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. After about a year or so, we had a charity in its own right set up called the Fed Up Community Cafe. And so the kind of main thrust of that is about breaking down social isolation within our community, where people can learn some new skills as well, and maybe use those skills to eat healthily and manage budgets within their shopping routine. So, and again, Fair Share, they sorry, the Fed Up Cafe operate an arrangement with FareShare, so that they're actually a food hub for 4 groups in total, including themselves. So they receive the food on a weekly basis, and then that gets distributed out to the other 3 groups: Apex Scotland, the local primary school, and our local women's aid group as well. So can I go on to the next page, Naomi? So we've recently been described as a community anchor group, and because we work in partnership with so many other groups within in a variety of different ways, supplying materials, running raffles, laying accessible pathways. We've got involved in any number of different things to support other groups that support the community. And we're never afraid to venture out and to try something new, and I think that's probably our motto, is about never being afraid. So yeah, you can see a list there, but I've put on the bottom that there's another 20 or so organisations that we've worked with over the past year because it's benefited our local community in one way or another. So could I next page, please? So you can see that what we've put in statistics, and that's really kind of as a correlation to the fund, because clearly we need to know what we're doing in terms of being able to apply for the fund. So we need to benchmark a lot of our information. So that enables us to set out where we're going in the future and how we're operating. And also we can use that information when we're actually making that application to establish whether or not by securing the funding we can drive our project forward or any new projects as well. Yeah, I suppose finally I would say on that we've just had a social return on investment report, and it's been identified by Social Labs that for every £4 that's invested, for every £1 that's invested, we provide £4 back, so into our local community. So clearly, that provides benefit. So the next page, please, Naomi. So this just a little architectural diagram there of some plans that we've had done, that we've been working with a series of consultants over the past year. We've undertaken a feasibility study to look at how we can develop the centre that we're in to maximise the potential from what we would call merchandise, the goods that would come in from the recycling centres. And also our local community as well, so we can try to put that to good use both in our local community through local retail sales, shop sales, and through online sales. So it's about expanding that and trying to draw down as much as we can in terms of income from the sale of those goods, which saves our local council money because items are not being recycled or disposed of, but also generates an income for us, so we can create more employment opportunities for our local community. And a good example of that is when we moved here 4 years ago, we had 4 employees that were full-time. Now we've got 26 employees, and 13 of those are employed as a direct result of the income from the shop, and the others are employed as a direct result of the effect that the shop has had on our local community. So we've seen some significant expansion over recent years because of the diversion of waste from landfill. Can I have the next page, please? Yeah, so I think it's fair to say we're very happy. We've had a very good relationship with the people at Inspiring Communities, and we find that they're very grounded, unlike the old civil servants that we were used to many years ago. So it's nice to meet Gillian today in person, but typically we would work with Christine Robertson, and I have to say Christine's an absolute star. So please be reassured that it's not you know, something to worry about, something to be fearful of if you're new to funding. I would suggest that the fund itself is very typically like a large lottery application, and it has all the information in there that I think you should be able to extract out of your business plan, including your financial plan as well. So all of that should be transferable across. And yeah, when you get to the point, if you're awarded the funding, they've got a system called HARPS in place, which I have to say is a massive step up on if people know about the leader program. It is absolutely user friendly, and there is always staff there to help and to support you in terms of being able to access it. For example, I lost a password one time, and I spoke to Christine. She passed me on to Abby, and Abby made sure I got access to it again straight away. But you can provide all your financial and written reports on the HARP system. Very easy to use, as I say. Yeah, and I think finally, just to say that just to report that we've had a very positive experience on the whole working with the Scottish Government team there, and we're very proud and pleased of what we've achieved, and we've been able to achieve that as a result of the funding that they provided. So next page, please. This is just a little bit of information about us, where you can find us. We're on the site of the Zero Waste Park in Stranraer. Typically, if you wanted to come and visit us, then feel free to make contact with us, and we can organise a visit if you would like. So on that note, I think it's a final page is just to say thank you very much, and if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's really valuable getting that kind of experience coming through from someone who's been a recipient of the fund. And I'm going to invite Gillian back now in terms of any questions as well. But if you've got any questions of Paul as well, and I think knowing the team are approachable and the reporting system is easy is really helpful, but actually also that this does feel like a large lottery application. So, you know, I think when we're applying for big chunks of money, we have to be aware that in order for people to make decisions on big amounts of money, they're going to need a lot of information. So, you know, nothing comes for free. So I guess it's being ready and being prepared with all of that and not being frightened of it, because actually there is a systematic way of working through applications. And like you say, don't be frightened of it. And it sounds like there's a great team there for support. So I can see there's some questions already coming through in the chat. So I'm just going to come to those first. And I can see, oh, I've got a bit of an echo. Apologies if you're hearing me twice. Once is bad enough, eh? So someone was just asking, I think early on, just in terms of the balance, I guess, between capital and revenue, and just asking what a bit of that rationale was. I think in your presentation you said that capital wasn't part of the fund before, so presumably there was a bit of a sense of demand for that, and this has been a step to try it out, would be my reading of the situation. Gillian?
Yeah, absolutely, Naomi. So I've put an answer back into the chat for Russell, and yeah, just to kind of quickly chat that through. The Investing in Communities Fund has always been a revenue fund. It's never had capital funding attached to it. I think particularly the experience, and again over the last couple of years, where very conscious communities have had to adapt to their spaces. So whether that's been to support the safety measures that have been needed for COVID, but also we're acutely aware of that, communities have been taking on new assets, and we're aware that there is now a lot more around in terms of empty spaces that communities are moving into and taking up, but they're not always necessarily in the right kind of state, if you like, to deliver the project or service. We've only got a small amount of capital funding here, and there are much bigger capital programs that are out there and available for major works that need to be done. But it was just about kind of trying to create a bit of flexibility within the fund, so that if you had a small amount of reconfiguring of your building or your place, that's maybe even around kind of making it climate friendly, upgrading your windows or your doors or something so that you're making savings on your energy efficiency, things like that, that there was a little bit of capital funding here, because smaller amounts of capital funding are not quite as easy to find sometimes. So those kind of post-acquisition costs and things like that. So we've been able to add a little bit of capital funding to the program this time. It's not massive, so there is we're keeping that element kind of fairly small within this fund so that we can try and maximize that across the projects that are likely to be successful through the application round. So
no, thank you. It's helpful for people to just have that understanding, I think, and it's interesting you pick up on the energy one. I think I'm running sessions soon on net zero transition fund and various bits, and I think as energy costs are rising, we're going to see the costs of investment into capital around net zero energy initiatives actually will start to become much more cost benefit based, just because energy is becoming pretty high, whether you're a homeowner or a community initiative at the moment. So
yeah, and I would encourage, I mean, there are a number of funds actually being delivered specifically through kind of energy support. So contacting the local energy advice service and Home Energy Scotland. So there's access to a range of different things there. So as I say, I mean, this is more for us around trying to create a bit of flexibility in the fund. So for as far as possible, you can maybe come to one place and get everything you need in one place, which would be lovely, I'm sure.
Thank you. Another question that's just popped in is about obviously geographical area, and I guess generally speaking, applications tend to fall within one local authority area, but someone's actually looking at a project across a health trust area. Do they have to be confined when they come in on applications to you to one particular local authority?
No, they don't. So again, I've put an answer back into the chat for this one. So applications can cover more than one local authority area. We are looking for organisations that are rooted within the community. So this isn't about large national third sector organisations that are delivering at a national scale, but we appreciate there are organisations that may be delivering one or two local authority areas, and the boundaries of the health authorities are in different places. So if you're working with Health and Social Care Partnership, that might take you into different local authority areas. One thing that we'd say within that, what we're looking for is for you to describe in your application form how the community is involved, how you're working with the community and the needs of that community. If you're working with more than one community, it's a little bit of a judgment for you to try and decide whether or not you can do that in one application form and addressing all of the communities that you're currently working with, or whether you might want to think about separate applications so that you can fully describe what you're doing. Obviously, if you're putting separate applications through, then they will be considered on their, on their own merit. So each application will be considered in its own right. The flip side to that is if you put it all into one application and we can't get a sense of the community involvement and the community need for each of those communities, that's maybe going to make it a slightly weaker application. So there's a balance for you to strike when you're thinking about that and how you're developing your application form, whether you feel it's best to do one or two or more.
I guess be aware of competition. I guess I'm just thinking in terms of so presumably organisations can put in a multiple number of applications on a realistic sense, or would that only be if they're moving out of one local authority area into another?
So we're kind of looking at it within a local authority area. From a place-based approach, you'll be looking at each of those local authority areas and how well connected the community response is. So we'll be kind of looking at that as part of our assessment. I mentioned in the presentation, we're looking for that collaboration and partnership that we've seen absolutely throughout. That might be more difficult to bring across in your application if you're covering multiple local authority areas. So understanding that and how you're working with the connected community organisations, local authority service, public health services, might be that would be a lot to try and cover in one application if you're working in multiple areas. So it's that connection within the communities that we're looking for. So yeah, we've kind of gone by local authority. It's a very rough cut by local authority area to try and give us some scale, some understanding of what's happening in those areas.
Sure, that makes sense. And then I guess this connects. I guess it's another question that's coming about that community need. Are you anticipating that there'll be stuff in applications backed up from local authorities or local third sector interfaces that can kind of support the community need aspect?
So yeah, there was a question that I haven't responded to yet because I probably needed to just tease that out with a bit whoever asked the question about the role of third sector interfaces and local authorities in the process. So your third sector interface has got a strong role for you, helping to potentially connect you with other community organisations. They provide a huge amount of guidance and advice around setting yourself up as a community organisation, all of those things, and can help you make some of those connections if they're not already there. Local authorities, it's about giving us that sense of how closely you're working with local authorities. So we focus towards kind of community anchor organisations, and the role of a community anchor organisation is kind of making those connections between what's happening in the rest of the community and the links up into and with public services, the local council, health and social care partnerships. It's an integrated joint board in your area. So it's connecting those things together, and how the project or service that you're delivering complements what's being delivered potentially by local public services, how it connects into local place plans. And so again, it's around that connection, so we can see the full picture, how things are kind of coming together. So we're not expecting TSIs or local authorities to endorse your applications. That's not what we're looking for, if that's part of the question.
Thank you. I think that's helpful, but obviously the application is going to have to show that you do understand that community need, whether it's direct research you've done yourself or using the reports of other organisations.
Yeah.
And just one last question for you, Jill, before I've got one for Paul. Just in terms of, obviously, I know Paul touched on quite a bit of stats around reporting as well, and someone's asked a very particular question about I guess, does the fund enable people to cover the costs of academic research that's part of the evaluation of a project at the end? Obviously, I think they mentioned the word proportionality, but is that something that's covered, or is it not covered as one of the eligible expenses?
So it can be covered, I think, yeah, as I've mentioned there, you're looking for something that's a proportionate cost. So you don't want to be bidding for thousands of pounds to cover an academic research report. We don't necessarily need that level of evaluation in there, but we know that communities can sometimes find that helpful in terms of those wider impacts and the outcomes from their projects. So you're looking at proportionate costs for evaluating and monitoring.
Thank you. Hopefully that's answered that question for someone. I think it's useful to know that. So there's lots of praise coming in for your presentation, Paul, and all the great work that's happening in Stranraer. I think as someone that's very connected with the whole circular economy agenda, I think the Stranraer initiative is fabulous, and every local authority area should have really strong reuse projects, and in the sense of connections with civic community sites and big facilities as well. So I always love hearing about your project. Someone's just asked, in terms of, obviously you've got a range of activities you're involved in, they're interested in terms of any trends that you've identified with service users or connections you've made with any other community partners.
Yeah, I've dropped a little message in there to David to respond to that. But yeah, we see lots of service users that they go across the various projects and events that we work with, and sometimes that's just a tentative insight into, well, we just see them, we just happen to meet up with them and have some conversations, whereas other times that it may be that we have a little bit more detailed involvement with them, and it could be, for example, that we have someone come in to buy something from us and they end up volunteering, and that could be for any number of different reasons, from someone typically someone that's retired and they're looking to do something to keep their physical health in good shape, or even their mental health and well-being, just in terms of stimulation on a day-to-day basis. But we've also had people that have been working with the social services teams, and they come in and they maybe want to do some practical activities. And that could be, in a cafe, that could be with the bikes, or it could be retail, it could be with our logistics team. So there is all sorts of connections, and we see all sorts of faces across the different services that we provide. And so we are kind of keen to have those conversations with people to see whether or not we can provide them with some additional benefit, rather than just being a customer or consumer.
I think that's where the real benefit of real community-led initiatives really comes through, isn't it? I think you know and understand your community, because actually you'll have users coming in all the time. You'll have, like you say, they're not just customers sometimes. Yeah. So you see those kind of crossovers. if anyone's got any more specific questions, do put them in the chat. I'm just going to ask perhaps a couple of general ones, if I may. Obviously, you talked about a minimum grant size and you talked about a maximum. Now, my experience of working around funding is people often try and push it to the maximum. Or it's not uncommon, I don't think. What would be the average size grant that you think comes through this fund? Because I always think it's helpful if people understand what an average grant is. And I was also going to ask, is there anything in terms of reasons for people getting rejected last time? Were there any key things that came through in terms of top reasons for rejection?
Really good questions, Naomi. Thank you. So, I mean, in terms of average grant size, I mean, this is a tricky one to answer, I'd have to say, Naomi, because it's really going to depend on whether or not you're working in partnership and then potentially the size of your partnership. So average grant size, I can probably easier to talk about from the first round of Investing Communities Fund was about 100,000 K per year. We are very much looking at encouraging more partnership bids through this round of the funding. Yeah, absolutely. If you put a maximum limit on there, people will go to the max and more. So I think what we have said in the guidance is about thinking very carefully about your project and the realistic costs that you need to deliver that project. So trying to encourage people to think not necessarily about what the maximum amount you can apply for is, but what do you actually need?
Absolutely. It's that need, isn't it? Because I always think my encouragement to people is always, if you think about what you need, your chances of success are probably much higher, because if everyone just came in with what they need, actually the fund goes further rather than a few organisations getting everything they want. More communities get things that they need, and I think it's always keeping that in balance. But it's hard, I think, when we've got ambitious projects and ambitious communities, because we sometimes think, oh, we could just do this as well, and what if we did this? And before you know it, a project, I think, has grown in scale.
Which is fine. I mean, if they've, and if the needs of growing a project in size and scale, increases the costs that needed to deliver that in itself is fine. I think what we will be looking at the costs that you put in. So there'll be a separate budget template. We will ask you to set out the costs that you need to deliver the project, and we will be looking at that. So there's potential that if we're looking at a project and think it's a good project, but there's costs in there that are not necessarily offering the best value for money, and I hate to use that term, I would have to say, but we do need to look at that. Then we will have a conversation with you and potentially not award the full amount that you've applied for. So just to bear that in mind, we will be looking very much at the need and those costs, and obviously trying to support as many projects as we can. So to bear that in mind. I think there was another question.
There was,
Naomi.
Yeah, I think if you can hear George the dog barking in the background, he's really keen to ask his question, which was just around, in terms of reasons for rejection last time, were there any kind of top reasons for rejection that people need to really think about before putting in a bid?
Probably the key thing I would be really trying to encourage and emphasize is being able to demonstrate to us how you understand where your project, where your service fits within the community and the wider needs of that community. So we're looking for that connectedness.
It's demonstrating need and connectedness, in essence, will be the key things to look at.
I think the hardest thing probably from the last round was really, I suppose, embedding the place-based approach. I mean, it was, the place principle had been around for a while, but actually, I think for communities getting to that space of understanding what place-based approaches were about was probably earlier in its formation when we launched the Investing Communities Fund last time round. We've had a much longer period of time now to get used to what that means, and I think because communities have just instinctively worked in that way over the last couple of years, that concept is probably not as difficult to kind of articulate now as it might have been before, and that connectivity. So I keep using that word, how you're connecting, how you're working in collaboration and partnership.
Yeah. So I guess there's a top tip coming through there, that if connectivity is that you're using a lot, it's going to be looked for. And I guess that perhaps brings us on to perhaps the last question that's just come through in the chat, which is just in terms of looking at joint funding, collaboration and partnership. if you're specifically looking for joint funding bids, how do people evidence that? Or is it a joint application with one person leading? Is it through support letters?
So a joint application, we'll have a lead applicant organisation. We'll be asking who you're working in partnership with. We need to be absolutely clear. You must be sharing your application form and the development of that with the partners that you're telling us that you're working with. So if we go and we speak to them, they will have full awareness of the application and what's said in it. So you must be connecting with them. We aren't in the application process formally asking for partnership agreements or anything like that, but that's something, if you are thinking about working in partnerships, you would probably want to think about developing. So some kind of memorandum of understanding, a partnership agreement, something that sets out your roles and responsibilities between each of the partner organisations. But we ask about the partnerships and the application. Who are you working with to deliver this?
Thank you. And perhaps just picking up a last question just on that partnerships. I mean, I speak about the area I live in. We're quite a small town. So often in very small towns, it's one organisation might be kind of the lead community organisation. Will that go against them if you're looking for partnership bids, or will it's very much that you're looking at a place as an individual place and what's realistic for it? Does that make sense?
I think so. I hope I'm picking up the question right. I've heard certain things there, Naomi, as I'm thinking about something else, and I'm going to try and answer it appropriately. Yeah, there's quite often one lead organisation. Sometimes in a community there is only one lead organisation. So I'm understanding that, and you know, you're the only active organisation in that place, and you're putting forward the application. That will be fine. We're not going to penalise somebody for not working in partnership if there's nobody to work in partnership with.
It does, but I think again it's making that clear so that people know it. So I know certainly in smaller rural communities that can be a question, though. I think also be aware that if you're saying there's no one to work in partnership with, understand that that's the people tend to know, or they've got contacts, or you look as part of an assessment. So if don't say it just because you don't want to work in partnership with someone, is what I'm saying to people, because people look and people test, and you know, you've got to be honest with yourself about all of that. I think is just my human response to that as well, just having seen lots of funding bids over the years and being part of assessment processes.
Absolutely. I mean, partnership approaches can work really well. I think the other bit probably to say around that is that, you know, if you've got more than one lead organisation in a community, if the geography of the distance means that, you know, you're not overlapping with your services. I mean, articulating to us that there's been a conversation and there's agreement between who's going to deliver this element of something and someone else is going to deliver that. It's understanding what the kind of needs of the community are as well in the round too. So we're looking to make sure that, you know, at least those conversations have happened. That we understand what's coming through in a single application form from one organisation not working in partnership understands and is clear on, you know, we're doing this because it's a standalone thing and there's no one else to work with on it.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna come just to Paul as a recipient of the fund, just for a last question. What would be your just your tips and advice to anyone out there that's just looking to apply as someone that's been successful?
I would probably take on board exactly what Tom has just said, is to make contact with Gillian and the team, you know, at the first instance, and drill down any questions that you've got, any queries, any clarification. But going back to what I said earlier, if the application is successful, is maintain that good, strong relationship. You know, it's I think what I've found over the years is sometimes the application's made, it's awarded, and then you distance yourself from the funder, when in fact you've got to maintain that relationship. And last year we were towards the end of the last year we were awarded an award, national award. We really appreciated that, and I said thank you to Christine, because Christine and the team are part of that. We couldn't have done half of what we do without the support and the working relationship that we have with the team in Scottish Government. So it is make sure that you maintain that on a routine basis, just touching base and having all the, whether it's a tricky conversation or whether or not it's just a regular run-of-the-mill chat, you know, but keeping that up.
I think that's actually a great tip, and I always people have invested more than the money. People have invested in you and your goals and your ambition.
Absolutely.
Gillian, you had a hand up.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Paul, thank you so much for the comments that you've made. I think, I mean, obviously I'm biased. The team are great, and we're human. We're here to help. So it's really good that I'm really grateful to you for kind of putting that message across to folk as well. We're not a big scary beast, and we're absolutely here to help. So delight that that's obviously the experience you've had, Paul, and that's, you know, that's what I feel that the team offer. So it's great to hear that back. So thank you for that. And yeah, I couldn't echo what Paul said enough. We're here. Keep in contact with us if you put a project through that's successful. Our first point is always to help. So if there's a problem, the sooner we know, the sooner we can help.
Thank
you.
And
if there's good things coming, the sooner we know, we can tell other people.
Brilliant. Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's partnership with funders, not just partnership in communities. That once people have invested in you, they want to hear how you're going, and actually want to hear you hear from you if you've had problems, because actually they may have come across those kind of issues with other groups as well and might be able to help. So a good funder is a good friend. And I think that's always useful to know. I'm going to thank our two speakers for today. I'm going to finish with my last tip, which is always when we do any session on funding, read the FAQs. I always think don't bother applying for something if you don't meet the criteria. You're wasting your time. Read the FAQs is always my top tip on any funding application. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Gillian and to Paul for joining us today, and see you all again soon at one of our webinars next week, maybe. Thank you very much.